Well, welcome to our coffee talk on privilege. I'm so pleased to have with me today Dr. Todd Goodson. He is the chair of curriculum and instruction. He's also our associate dean of teacher education. So I'm so happy he's here to share his insights with us and give us some background on privilege. But let's get started by introducing yourself, Dr. Goodson, please.
Well, thank you, Dr. Perez. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been at K-State since 1997. Spent 16 years doing the secondary program, licensure programs in English and speech theater and journalism. And I spent the last 9 in departmental administration. And happy to be with you today to talk about an important issue.
Yes, well, we're so happy to have you here. Your insight is going to be very profound on this topic in particular, I feel. And just for all those of you out there, he's an excellent boss, and a great leader, so we're happy to have him here with us today. So Dr. Goodson, when you think about privilege, what comes to mind?
Oh, goodness. It's a hot button issue. It's one of those things that you can start a fight just by mentioning it if you aren't careful. And so I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind is approaching this with sensitivity and with care. Because we know whenever the word privilege comes out, people get defensive, and I think that's unfortunate, and I think it takes us down a path that's unproductive in a whole bunch of ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know that particularly with my undergraduate students, this topic of privilege, they often associate with blame. Like we're blaming them for being, a certain ethnicity. We're blaming them for all these things. And it's not about that. It's just about awareness and increasing their understanding of what it is and those inherent, systemic privileges that we do have based on our background. So with our MAT students who are coming back into education, a lot of them have been in other fields. I'm sure they've had previous experience with this topic. But when it comes to education specifically, why is this so important for us to understand?
Well, that is a big question, Dr. Perez. It's important for us to understand our own positionality. I'll say privilege, I'll say baggage, everything we carry with us when we go into the classroom. And it's difficult, I think, to understand our students very well unless we understand ourselves. And so that's the first part of it, doing a deep dive into our own backgrounds and our own histories and the legacies that we carry, and then turning the lens to our students and considering how the world looks from their perspectives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that knowing our own background, I think, is the first step in really getting to understand privilege, because we all come from a specific viewpoints and past that have influenced us and influenced the way we'll perceive our own classrooms in the future and how that could impact our students. A lot of times our participants in the MAP program are going to be a multi-state. They'll come from some even internationally. So given the variety of experiences we're going to have, we know that nationwide, though, this concept of privilege has a huge impact, particularly with a diverse student population. So do you have some tips you can give some of our MAT students when it comes to how best to, once they have understood their own privilege, how best to kind of interpret that in the classroom?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning and say take a deep breath and count as far as you need to count until the blood pressure goes down and you can address the issue dispassionately. I like what you said about blame, because we're quick in the white community. We are quick to jump from privilege to blame. And speaking personally, I'm a first-generation college student. One of my parents finished high school, the other didn't. I grew up on a farm in relative isolation and near poverty. Okay, so you say privilege to me, and I say, you don't know me, you don't know my history. I don't always feel very privileged, and then we jump to the blame, and blame is counterproductive, and that's the first thing we have to put aside, and if we can approach the topic with the idea that we're all going to grow together and we're not going to blame one another, then I think that's a productive starting point.
I couldn't agree more. I know that as an educator myself, coming from a different background than yours, having that Latina heritage, that experience. I am also first generation. Neither of my parents finished school, not even elementary school. And then we lost a lot of our culture and background just from the idea of we've got to be native English speakers. We have to be certain things to be able to be successful. And my expectation of my parents were that we'd all go to college. That was their goal and their dream for us. So, we've all had different levels of education. I have 4 brothers and a sister. We all did pursue higher education, though, and have different success with it. But again, that privilege, I think, a lot of times if we talk about that in the context of a classroom setting, our students will feel like, oh, well, she's blaming me. From my lens, they're coming like, she's blaming me for being white. And I'm like, that's not what privilege is about. It's really about understanding those advantages you have at the systemic level.
It's about our stories, and it's about acknowledging and owning the less than level playing field in any given context that we walk into. And different contexts carry different kinds of privilege for different individuals. And we can get to whether that's right or wrong, and we can get to what to do about it to try to level the playing field. But the first step is to approach it without the knee-jerk emotional reaction.
Exactly. And I think if we can take the politics out of it as well, a lot of times this becomes a hot button topic with politicians, trying to get people on one or the other side of the fence. When again, it's really not about that political, levying that we're trying to engage in. It's really about understanding the stories.
No, and I would go one more step and say I don't think anyone on either side of the political aisle would object if we say we should treat everyone equitably, we should treat everyone equally, we should treat everyone fairly and respectfully. I don't think that's part of the political division, and if we start from that point, I think we can go somewhere productive.
Yeah, and I think too, understanding that equality doesn't mean the same for everyone. It's really about making sure we're meeting our students, particularly where they're at and what we can provide for them.
Sure.
And in different settings, that's going to look different. In a rural setting versus an urban setting versus a high density population with lots of diversity versus in Kansas, we have several areas that are, primarily white dominated. So again, it's about teaching those students who are from that more privileged background about what that means and then how to address that in other situations.
Certainly, because and there are certainly situations that I can walk into where privilege is assigned to me based on age, based on gender, based on race, based on class, and part of the process is owning that.
Yeah. And I think that's what I respect so much about you, Dr. Goodson, is you understand that concept. And in your position, I think you've done a great job of modeling for those of us here in the College of Education as well in other areas that privilege doesn't come with like set expectations, and you're not expecting certain things, but your understanding of your own background and then really supporting those of us to move forward from where we are as well.
And that at the end of the day is what we're all trying to do to move forward from where we are.
Exactly. Well, any final tips for the Matt students when it comes to this topic, or even as they continue their journey?
It's a terribly important topic, and it's going to become more and more important in certainly the early phase of your career, and likely for all of your career. And I would expect that if you do it right, your understanding will deepen over time, and give yourself a chance to grow into a deeper understanding of the issue of privilege.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Goodson.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here and giving your insights. And we'll see you all soon in our next coffee talk. Thank you.